It was 2:48 in the afternoon on December 2nd, 1993, when the richest criminal in history stood barefoot on a stranger's rooftop, breathing hard, clutching a pistol, knowing the world he built with blood and money was about to end. Below him, boots thundered up stairwells. Above him, helicopters circled like vultures. Somewhere in the sky, invisible machines tracked the heat of his body. 14 minutes earlier, he had made the mistake that killed him. He answered his son's phone call. The man who controlled governments, cartels, and entire cities could not hang up on a crying child. And in that moment, Pablo Escobar, worth more than nations, became just another hunted man. But this is not the story of how Pablo Escobar died. This is the story of how one man grew so powerful that Colombia itself bent around him, and how that power began with a cemetery at 2 a.m. Long before presidents feared his name, before bombs fell from the sky, before entire cities learned to whisper, Pablo Escobar stood among gravestones in Medellin, holding a crowbar in the dark. He was 14 years old. The cemetery was silent except for the sound of stone scraping against stone. Pablo had discovered something most people never realize. The dead were worth more than the living. A stolen headstone could be sanded down and resold for more money than his father earned in months. 3 nights of grave robbing paid better than honest work ever could. But what truly changed Pablo was not the money, it was the guard. The man paid to stop criminals was quietly selling information about fresh burials. In that moment, Pablo understood something terrifyingly simple. The system was already corrupt. He just wasn't profiting from it yet. Pablo Escobar was born in December 1949 in rural Colombia, the 3rd child of a farmer and a school teacher. His family wasn't criminal. They weren't wealthy. They were ordinary people living in a country slowly tearing itself apart. When they moved to Medellin, the city was exploding with growth, poverty, and violence. Millions arrived looking for work. Few found it. Pablo was not strong. He wasn't athletic. He wasn't popular. But he watched, and he learned early that money wasn't just power, it was immunity. He dreamed of becoming a lawyer, then a politician, but poverty ended those dreams quickly. When he dropped out of school, Pablo made himself a promise so extreme it bordered on madness. If he didn't become a millionaire by his mid-20s, he would kill himself. That obsession with wealth, fast, absolute, unquestioned, became the engine that drove everything that followed. At first, the crimes were small: fake diplomas, stolen sound equipment, smuggled goods, tombstones ripped from graves. But small crimes brought small money. Pablo wanted scale. By his late teens, he had escalated to car theft and kidnapping. Wealthy businessmen vanished. Ransoms were paid. Sometimes Pablo killed them anyway, not for necessity, but for reputation. Fear was an investment. In 1971, after kidnapping an industrialist and receiving the ransom, Pablo murdered him anyway. The message was clear: payment did not guarantee mercy. By 22, Pablo Escobar was a millionaire. The police noticed. Arrests followed. In 1974, Pablo sat in a Medellin police station facing years in prison. That's when history shifted. An officer closed the door and said 7 words that changed everything. "I know who your real father is." The threat would destroy Pablo's family. So Pablo offered money. But he also did something far more dangerous. He recorded the conversation. From that moment on, the officer didn't protect Pablo. He belonged to him. Within months, Pablo owned police officers, judges, prison guards. He didn't avoid the law. He bought it. He documented every bribe, every confession, every crime. By age 20, Pablo wasn't paying for protection. He was collecting it. The teenage grave robber had discovered the ultimate business model. Corruption scaled infinitely. But violence made his name spread faster than money ever could. When a rival kidnapped Pablo's cousin, demanding ransom, Pablo walked into the man's compound alone during a family celebration. He whispered something in the kidnapper's ear and left calmly. 10 minutes later, the cousin was released and the rival fled the country forever. The threat was a lie, but the fear was real. Medellin learned a new rule. Pablo Escobar would do things others only threatened. Then came the math mistake that built an empire. In the early 1970s, Pablo watched traffickers sell coca paste locally, celebrating what they thought were massive profits. Pablo calculated differently. A kilo worth hundreds in Peru became tens of thousands in Miami. The profit wasn't 10 times, it was more than 100. Everyone else was thinking small. Pablo thought continents. Within months, competitors died, routes changed hands, and Pablo controlled supply lines others barely understood. When a shipment crashed in Panama, Pablo expected loss. Instead, a general called him. For 10%, the government would guarantee safe passage. Pablo saw the future instantly. If one government could be bought, why not all of them? At 26, standing over a map of Latin America, Pablo made a prediction that sounded insane. In 5 years, he would hold more power than governments. He underestimated himself. By the late 1970s, Pablo Escobar was no longer a trafficker, he was a system. He created networks where competitors became customers. He charged others to use his routes. Every rival fed his empire. Planes flew constantly. Cocaine crossed oceans. Money flooded in so fast it couldn't be counted. It had to be weighed. Warehouses filled with cash. Rats ate millions. Humidity destroyed billions. Pablo shrugged. Losing 10% meant nothing when you controlled 80% of the world's cocaine. At his peak, Pablo Escobar was earning over $400 million a week. His fortune reached $25 billion, so large it rivaled Colombia's entire economy. He owned private airports, islands, submarines, zoos, mansions, fleets of cars. He burned millions in cash just to keep his daughter warm during a night on the run. And still, the money never stopped. But power attracts attention, and attention breeds enemies. To protect himself, Pablo entered politics. He built homes for the poor, stadiums, roads, soccer fields, entire neighborhoods. Cameras filmed every gift. Names were recorded. Gratitude was archived. Charity wasn't kindness, it was leverage. Thousands now owed him their lives. When police asked questions, the streets went silent. When rallies were needed, crowds appeared. In 1982, Pablo Escobar became a member of Colombia's Congress. That was his first real mistake, because for the first time, someone refused to look away. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla exposed Pablo's past arrests. The illusion shattered. Pablo offered bribes, millions. Lara refused. Weeks later, gunmen emptied magazines into his car. Colombia crossed a line it could never uncross. Bombs followed. Judges died. Journalists vanished. The war had begun. Pablo Escobar declared himself above the state. Plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the money or take the bullet. Police officers died by the hundreds. Children became assassins. Airplanes exploded mid-air. Entire buildings collapsed. The country lived in fear, and Pablo ruled from the shadows like an uncrowned king. But every empire creates the force that destroys it. And Pablo Escobar's greatest enemy wasn't the police. It was time.
By the mid-1980s, Colombia was no longer a country in the normal sense. It was a battlefield with traffic lights, a place where people learned to read explosions the way others read weather. And at the center of it all was one man whose name could stop conversations mid-sentence. Pablo Escobar had crossed the threshold that no criminal before him ever reached. He was no longer hiding from the state, he was fighting it openly. The moment Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was gunned down in traffic, Colombia understood the rules had changed. This was no longer about drugs, it was about power. Lara had refused bribes. He had named Escobar publicly, and for that, he had been erased. The assassination sent a shockwave through the government. Judges panicked, politicians recalculated, police officers began sleeping in different houses every night, and Pablo watched the fear spread like fire, because fear was the only language he truly trusted. The United States noticed immediately. DEA agents poured into Bogotá with something Pablo could not intimidate or bribe: technology, satellites, signal tracking, international pressure. For the first time, Pablo Escobar faced an enemy that did not need to see him to kill him, and that terrified him more than bullets ever could. Extradition to the United States became his obsession. An American prison meant isolation, silence, irrelevance. It meant dying slowly behind concrete walls where money meant nothing. Pablo decided that extradition would never happen, not to him, not while he was alive. So he escalated. What followed was not crime, it was terrorism. Car bombs detonated outside government buildings, police stations vanished in fireballs, journalists were hunted like animals, judges were murdered in front of their families. Pablo created a simple formula that broke the country's spine. For every official who refused a bribe, 7 people around them would die: fathers, brothers, wives, children. He wanted the cost of resistance to feel infinite, and it worked. Files disappeared, cases collapsed, witnesses went silent, entire courtrooms emptied. But Pablo was not satisfied with intimidation. He wanted submission. He wanted to bend the future itself. In November 1989, a bomb detonated inside Avianca Flight 203, ripping the aircraft apart at 13,000 feet. 107 civilians died instantly. Pablo's target, a presidential candidate, was not even on board. The mistake didn't matter. The message did. No place was safe. Not the sky, not a bus, not a courthouse. Colombia learned that Escobar could reach anywhere, anytime, and kill anyone, even by accident. The bloodshed reached a level so extreme that Medellin became statistically the most dangerous city on earth. Murders averaged nearly 20 a day. Children grew up counting bodies. Funerals became routine. And through it all, Pablo Escobar remained untouched, hiding behind money, fear, and a private army of teenage killers who murdered for wages cheaper than a used motorcycle. Yet even monsters need legitimacy. To the poor, Pablo Escobar did not look like a terrorist, he looked like a savior. He built neighborhoods where there had only been mud. He handed out cash in slums. He funded soccer teams, beauty pageants, and public works. In Medellin, murals of Pablo appeared on walls. Mothers named their children after him. To thousands, he was not a criminal. He was the only man who had ever helped them. This contradiction became known as the Pablo Escobar syndrome, the ability to be both butcher and benefactor, feared and loved at the same time. And Pablo leaned into it. He poured money into politics again, believing he could outgrow the law entirely. But this time, the spotlight burned hotter. Investigations reopened, evidence resurfaced, newspapers printed what everyone already knew but had been too afraid to say. Pablo realized too late that visibility was dangerous. The illusion cracked. He resigned from politics in rage, and retaliation followed immediately. Editors died, critics vanished, Colombia spiraled further into chaos. The government faced an impossible choice: continue fighting and watch the country bleed, or make a deal with the devil. By the early 1990s, the death toll was unbearable. Bombs shook the capital. Police forces were collapsing.
Pablo Escobar offered a solution that sounded insane but felt like relief. He would surrender on one condition: he would build his own prison. It should have been laughed out of the room. Instead, it was accepted. La Catedral rose on a hill overlooking Medellin, disguised as a prison but built like a resort. Soccer fields, a bar, telephones, private suites, guards he personally selected. Pablo did not enter captivity, he relocated headquarters. From La Catedral, he continued running the Medellin cartel, hosting meetings, giving orders, counting money. It was the greatest humiliation in Colombian history, but for a brief moment, the violence slowed, and that was enough for the government to pretend this was justice. Inside La Catedral, Pablo Escobar became something worse than a king. He became untouchable. He summoned traffickers to his prison and absorbed them. Refuse and your secrets went to the DEA. Accept and you paid him a percentage forever. In a single afternoon, Pablo transformed from fugitive to CEO of every major trafficking operation in Colombia. His income increased while officially imprisoned. He had proven something chilling. Power did not require freedom, it required leverage. But absolute power corrodes absolutely. Paranoia consumed him. He suspected betrayal everywhere. 2 trusted lieutenants arrived with money payments one night. Pablo accused them of stealing. What followed broke even hardened killers. For hours, he tortured one with household tools, burning flesh while demanding confessions that never came. The other was forced to watch before being murdered himself. Guards overheard the screams. The horror leaked outside the walls. This time, the government could not look away. Moving Pablo to a real prison became inevitable, and Pablo knew it. On a fog-covered night in July 1992, Colombian soldiers surrounded La Catedral. They thought they were transferring a prisoner. Pablo was already gone. He slipped through a tunnel he had ordered built months earlier, emerging beyond the perimeter into freedom. The prison he designed did exactly what it was meant to do: not hold him, but protect him until escape. Pablo Escobar was once again a fugitive. But something had changed. This time, the world was done negotiating. The United States deployed elite units. Colombian search bloc intensified operations. And in the shadows, a new enemy emerged: Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. They were not police, they were not soldiers, they were survivors, rivals, former allies, and they knew things no outsider should know about: safe houses, family movements, hidden accounts. Someone close to Pablo was talking. The man who once controlled everything began losing pieces daily. Cousins murdered, friends disappeared, associates turned informant to save their children. Pablo's empire collapsed not in a single explosion, but in relentless erosion. His circle shrank from thousands to dozens, then to 5. Technology closed in as well. Surveillance aircraft intercepted signals. Every phone call became a risk, every conversation a countdown. Pablo was trapped inside an invisible cage that tightened whenever he reached for the one thing he loved more than power: his love for his family. And soon, that love would become the weapon that killed him.
By late 1992, Pablo Escobar was no longer ruling an empire. He was surviving inside a shrinking nightmare. The man who once commanded armies now moved like a ghost, sleeping on mattresses that never stayed in one place for more than a night. Every safe house felt temporary. Every knock sounded like death. The streets of Medellin, the city he once owned, had turned against him. Posters offering millions for information about his whereabouts hung on walls he had once paid to build. And the most terrifying part? Pablo Escobar no longer knew who was loyal. Los Pepes struck with surgical precision. They didn't just kill his men, they erased them. Bodies appeared with messages carved into skin. Houses were burned. Businesses connected to Escobar exploded overnight. Entire bloodlines vanished. It wasn't random, it was systematic. Someone was feeding them intelligence, accurate, intimate, devastating intelligence. Pablo suspected everyone. He ordered polygraph tests, he interrogated bodyguards, he executed men for hesitating too long before answering questions. Loyalty was no longer enough, it had to be proven daily. Even then, it wasn't trusted. His inner circle shrank until only a handful of terrified men remained, men who knew staying with him meant dying, but leaving meant dying faster. At the same time, technology hunted him relentlessly. High above Medellin, surveillance aircraft circled silently, invisible to radar. Every radio transmission, every phone call, every electronic whisper was intercepted. Pablo thought the city's chaos could hide him. He didn't understand that he was no longer hiding from humans. He was hiding from machines. Each time he picked up a phone, the cage tightened. But Pablo kept calling. He called his mother, Hermilda, who begged him to surrender. He called his wife, Maria, whose voice grew thinner with every conversation. And most dangerously, he called his children, especially his son. Juan Pablo Escobar was trapped in Colombia, rejected by embassies, hunted by enemies who wanted revenge written in blood. Pablo knew the rules: 30 seconds maximum on any call. Less was better. Silence was survival. But rules collapse when emotion enters. Every time his son cried, Pablo stayed on the line longer than he should have. He promised escape, Germany, safety, Christmas together. He made promises he couldn't keep, and every promise stretched the signal just a little longer. Search Block noticed patterns. Los Pepes noticed patterns. Someone else noticed patterns too. Someone who had once sworn loyalty and now wanted out alive. As weeks passed, Pablo's wealth became useless. He couldn't move money, he couldn't trust banks, he couldn't even trust burial sites where billions once rotted underground. Power had abandoned him, fear had turned inward. The king of cocaine was now a prisoner of his own reputation. On December 1st, 1993, Pablo Escobar turned 44 years old. There was no party, no music, no crowds. He sat in a small rented safe house in a middle-class neighborhood, listening to a crackling radio announce a reward for information leading to his capture, millions of dollars. He laughed bitterly. He had once spent more than that on a single night. Now it was the price on his head. That night, he made the mistake he knew would kill him. He stayed on the phone. Juan Pablo called again. He was panicking. Borders were closed. Enemies were watching. Pablo stayed on the line. 1 minute passed. 2, 5, 10. Centra Spike triangulated the signal to a 6-block radius. Helicopters were scrambled, ground units mobilized silently. Pablo felt it, that old instinct, the one that had saved him for decades, screamed inside his chest. But he didn't hang up. On December 2nd at 2:48 p.m., Pablo Escobar answered his son's call again. 14 minutes and 23 seconds later, the hunters had his exact location. At 3 p.m., boots thundered up the stairs. The front door exploded inward. Pablo dropped the phone. His last bodyguard, Alvaro El Limon, fired blindly as bullets tore through the walls. Pablo ran barefoot toward the roof, heart pounding, lungs burning. He was slower now, heavier. Age and fear had caught up. They crashed through a window. On the rooftop, helicopters hovered like vultures. Gunfire erupted from every direction. El Limon was hit 3 times, neck, chest, head, and collapsed instantly. Pablo was alone. For a moment, just a moment, the man who once bent nations stood still, surrounded. Some say he raised his pistol. Some say he fired twice. Some say the final shot entered through his right ear, the exact place he had once told his son to aim if capture ever came. On December 2nd at 3:15 p.m., Pablo Escobar fell onto the roof of a stranger's house. The 7th richest man in history died barefoot, bleeding, and alone. But death didn't end him, it transformed him.
Search block posed with his body like hunters with a trophy. The photo raced around the world before his family even knew he was gone. Colombia declared victory, the United States declared success, and Medellin, 25,000 people attended his funeral. They cried, they prayed, they thanked him, because even in death, Pablo Escobar remained what he had always been, a contradiction too powerful to bury.
Pablo Escobar was dead. His body lay cold on a Medellin rooftop, bullets still warm in the concrete around him. Yet Colombia did not feel free. In the hours after his death, something deeply unsettling became clear. The cocaine did not stop moving, the money did not stop flowing, and the violence did not stop breathing. It simply changed hands. Within 48 hours, the Cali cartel absorbed most of Escobar's trafficking routes. Within weeks, cocaine shipments to the United States increased by nearly 30%. The king was gone, but the throne had never been empty. Pablo Escobar, in the end, was not the disease. He was the most visible symptom of it. On December 3, 1993, more than 25,000 people followed his coffin through the streets of Medellin. These were not politicians or officials, they were the poor. Mothers who once received bags of cash, fathers whose children played on football fields built with cartel money, families who lived in houses paid for by Pablo Escobar. They cried openly, they shouted his name, they called him El Patron. To the outside world, this grief was incomprehensible. How could a man responsible for thousands of murders, bombings, and national terror be mourned like a saint? But Escobar understood something governments never did. When people have nothing, even blood money feels like salvation. He gave them roofs, roads, food, and dignity in a country that had abandoned them. And in exchange, many forgave everything. While the crowds mourned, Escobar's family disappeared into fear. His wife, Maria, his son, Juan Pablo, his daughter, Manuela. The name Escobar became a death sentence. Bank accounts were frozen, governments refused asylum, airlines would not sell tickets. Juan Pablo was forced to change his name to Sebastián Marroquín just to survive. Even after Pablo's death, rival cartels believed his bloodline was unfinished business. There was still a price on his son's head. Pablo Escobar was dead. His body lay cold on a Medellin rooftop, bullets still warm in the concrete around him. Yet Colombia did not feel free. In the hours after his death, something deeply unsettling became clear. The cocaine did not stop moving. The money did not stop flowing, and the violence did not stop breathing. It simply changed hands. Within 48 hours, the Cali cartel absorbed most of Escobar's trafficking routes. Within weeks, cocaine shipments to the United States increased by nearly 30%. The king was gone, but the throne had never been empty. Pablo Escobar, in the end, was not the disease. He was the most visible symptom of it. On December 3, 1993, more than 25,000 people followed his coffin through the streets of Medellin. These were not politicians or officials, they were the poor. Mothers who once received bags of cash, fathers whose children played on football fields built with cartel money, families who lived in houses paid for by Pablo Escobar. They cried openly, they shouted his name, they called him El Patron. To the outside world, this grief was incomprehensible. How could a man responsible for thousands of murders, bombings, and national terror be mourned like a saint? But Escobar understood something governments never did. When people have nothing, even blood money feels like salvation. He gave them roofs, roads, food, and dignity in a country that had abandoned them. And in exchange, many forgave everything. While the crowds mourned, Escobar's family disappeared into fear. His wife, Maria, his son Juan Pablo, his daughter Manuela. The name Escobar became a death sentence. Bank accounts were frozen, governments refused asylum, airlines would not sell tickets. Juan Pablo was forced to change his name to Sebastián Marroquín just to survive. Even after Pablo's death, rival cartels believed his bloodline was unfinished business. There was still a price on his son's head. Years later, Sebastián would say something chilling. His father loved them so deeply that he destroyed them. He grew up haunted by gunfire, whispered threats, and the knowledge that love was his father's greatest weakness. As time passed, the truth behind Pablo's final moments slowly emerged. Technology did not kill him alone. He was betrayed. Declassified documents revealed that one of his most trusted sicarios, a man who had eaten at his table and survived beside him, made a calculation. After witnessing the brutal torture and murder of Galeano and Moncada inside La Catedral, he understood that loyalty was no longer protection. It was a death sentence. So he chose survival. He contacted Los Pepes, then the DEA, then Colombian intelligence. He gave them everything: safe houses, routes, phone habits, and the exact moments Pablo would break his own rules for his family. The hunters did not just track Escobar, they waited for him to become human. Over time, Pablo Escobar stopped being a man and became a myth. Netflix turned him into a character. Murals turned him into folklore. T-shirts turned him into a logo. But beneath the legend was a reality that could not be erased. He ordered the deaths of children. He burned judges alive. He bombed civilians to make political points. He ruled through terror. And still, some people loved him. That contradiction is now known as the Escobar paradox, a man who uplifted the poor while drowning a nation in blood, a criminal who fought the state by becoming more powerful than the state itself, a father whose love ultimately betrayed him. What Pablo Escobar truly proved was not just how far crime could go, but how fragile power really is. He showed that money could buy police, judges, politicians, laws, and even constitutions. He proved that fear spreads faster than justice, and that once fear becomes normal, violence becomes invisible. Colombia survived him, but it paid a terrible price. By the early 1990s, more than 25,000 people were dying violently every year. Medellin became the most dangerous city on earth. Entire generations grew up knowing only explosions, funerals, and silence. So who was Pablo Escobar? A monster? A businessman? A revolutionary? A psychopath? A father? He was all of them at once. And that is why, decades later, his story still refuses to die. Because Pablo Escobar was not just a man, he was a warning of what happens when poverty meets corruption, when money replaces morality, when fear becomes law, and when one man grows larger than the country meant to stop him.